Is there a better way to spend April than doing funky dancing? But good God, what beats making IGCSE English language videos? In this particular one, I look at 1F from the 0627 CIE IGCSE English Language Paper 1. Rather than start with a full response, my aim this time is to improve your technique when it comes to analysing language in detail. In the first half, I will give targeted exercises and examples to help you be far more specific and detailed when exploring language, before moving to a full 1F later. It's going to be useful, so stay tuned. This is Schofield on Shakespeare. In order to help you navigate between sections particularly useful to you, I've colour-coded headers as shown below. Yellow summarise what is required for 1F and gives the top 3 bands of the mark scheme. In grey, I introduce a very short extract from George Eliot's The Mill on the Floss and do some closely targeted work on how to analyse very specific phrases. Orange, I move to my first extract from Thomas Hardy's The Mayor of Casterbridge. Once again, rather than doing a full 1F question, the aim is to help you analyse specific phrases in as much precise detail as possible. Green contains a different extract from the Mayor of Casterbridge. In this section, we look at a pretty tricky example of imagery and once again aim to analyse this with precision and imaginative insight. Finally, in red, this is your chance to do a full 1F, although some help is given with suggested specific phrases to analyse shown in red on screen. In the pink section, I explain the examiner's perspective and how they will be marking your response, before in black showing you my own model answer. This is analysed within the final section of the video with the white header. So for question 1 as a whole, you have a passage to read from a 19th century text. In 1F, you will be directed to a particular paragraph and asked to explore the writer's use of language, and more crucially, the effect of the writer's use of language by selecting appropriate powerful words and phrases. Here's the top 3 bands of the mark scheme. Let's just highlight a few points from the top band. Your analysis of language needs to be perceptive. It needs to show sensitive insight into the meaning and effects of particular words and phrases. This of course means that some of your quotations need to be reasonably complex and interesting. If you just pick obvious quotations, then there won't be much to say beyond the basic. What are the associations of your selected words and phrases? Words always have a literal meaning, but they often have associations as well. To give a silly example, the literal meaning of a teacher is someone who attempts to impart knowledge, usually in a school. But what is the word teacher potentially associated with? This will vary according to the context, but often teachers can be associated with being, God forbid, dull or unfashionable. I think this section of the mark scheme is key. You must explore imagery within the passage, so any similes, metaphors or uses of personification. Moreover, as well as precise analysis, the examiner is looking for some imagination in your response. As long as you back up your views by close reference to the text, aim to write at least 2 to 3 sentences exploring the effect of any similes, metaphors or personification in the passage. So we need literal meaning and word associations. The question will always be in the format shown in blue. However, there will probably be 2 or 3 bullet points for you to focus on rather than just one as here. In this section, I want to focus on how the writer uses language to present Maggie's feelings. Here's the extract from George Eliot's The Mill on the Floss. Lucy, Maggie began again. He struggled too. He wanted to be true to you. He will come back to you. Forgive him. He will be happy then. These words were wrung forth from Maggie's deepest soul with an effort like the convulsed clutch of a drowning man. Lucy trembled and was silent. There are some tricky words in this passage, as there will also be in the exam. As an aside, what are you doing to expand your vocabulary to ensure that you fully understand any complex words that come up? You won't be able to use a dictionary in the exam, of course. My videos entitled Boosting Understanding of 19th Century Vocabulary for GCSE may help, but you should also ensure you are genuinely interested in words. Whenever you read a word you half know, get into the habit of looking it up in a dictionary and jotting it down. Anyway, on screen you can see the definition of ring, which is to force by twisting or by pressure. What does this word imply about the willingness of Maggie to say these things to Lucy? Did these words come easily? Did they perhaps cause her some kind of pain? First written task now. How does Maggie feel about telling Lucy about the man's actions? Use the quotation underlined in red to write 3 to 5 sentences answering this question, which would of course potentially form part of a much larger 1F response. Press pause now. Here's what I wrote. Think about how it compares to your version. It is clear that Maggie is extremely reluctant to tell Lucy about the man's actions. The narrator states that these words were wrung forth from Maggie's deepest soul. The past participle wrung emphasises that Maggie is forcing herself to reveal these things to Lucy, and even that these words are causing her twisting physical pain. This is a precise response and shows a technical command of language by identifying accurately wrung as a past participle. But does it need to be developed further to get the grade 9? Yes. Here is the development. Additionally, the fact that the words come from her deepest soul indicates that she is revealing extremely personal, private, guarded feelings. Let's now look at the second part of the same sentence from the extract. Again, some complex vocabulary. What exactly, not hazily, does convulsed mean? If you were working independently on a passage, I would hope you would take the initiative to look it up in a dictionary. On this occasion, I've done it for you. Convulse is to shake violently with sudden, uncontrolled movements. What does this suggest about Maggie's feelings as she makes the effort to reveal difficult truths to Lucy? What is it doing to her? Second task now. Using your precise understanding of convulse and the simile as a whole, write 3 to 5 sentences exploring what this simile reveals about Maggie's feelings. You should use the quotation underlined in red on screen. Press pause now. Here's my response. Eliot uses a simile to emphasise Maggie's feelings of desperation. She writes that she spoke with an effort like the convulsed clutch of a drowning man. This simile compares Maggie's efforts to speak with the violently shaking hand of someone drowning. This suggests that emotionally she feels extraordinarily precarious and is struggling to survive. But in order to get a grade 9 for this question, one single sentence analysing language can often be insufficient. How could this response be developed? Well, I developed my answer further by writing, the implication is clearly that she is in terrible emotional turmoil and that the effect of speaking may potentially have catastrophic consequences upon her future well-being. Just as someone drowning is likely to be irreparably changed following the ordeal, they will be either dead or have a clear sense of the vulnerability of their mortality, so Maggie is likely to be similarly scarred. Here's another extract, this time from Thomas Hardy's The Mayor of Casterbridge. This time, we're focusing on how Hardy uses language to describe the natural landscape. Press pause to read it now. Can we hone in on one particularly interesting example of imagery? To watch the heaven, the sky hung with rosy cloud was like looking at some grand feat of stagery from a darkened auditorium. What does this suggest about the sky? What do we know about going to theatres and the separation between those in the audience and those on stage? What does this suggest about the writer's view of the sky? Task 3 is on the screen now. Off you go. My answer. Hardy's simile emphasises the separation between the position of the humans and the cloudy sky. He writes that to look at the west heaven was like looking at some grand feat of stagery from a darkened auditorium. Just as members of an audience in a theatre can only look up and admire an impressive stage from a distance, so those watching the sky know that they can only spectate rather than be a part of its beauty. But of course development is required. I continue, this time picking up on another interesting word used within the quotation. The adjective darkened emphasises the difference in light between the sky and the location of the onlookers. The sky is much brighter and thus more beautiful and impressive. How did your answer compare? How could you have improved it, developed it, or phrased your points more precisely? It might be worth spending some time improving your response in the light of my model response. If you think that's the case, press pause now. Time for another extract from the Mayor of Casterbridge. Now we're looking at how Hardy uses language to describe the clocks. Read the passage, pressing pause now. I want to hone in on this simile. A row of tall, varnished case clocks from the interior of a clockmaker's shop joined in one after another, like a row of actors delivering their final speeches before the fall of the curtain. Let's think about actors on stage delivering speeches at the end of a play. Do they normally speak at the same time, interrupt each other? And what does this suggest about the timing and the order of the clocks chiming? Task 4. Off you go. Press pause. I wrote, Hardy's simile stresses the fact that different clocks are chiming rapidly in succession, but at different times from each other. He compares this to a row of actors delivering their final speeches before the fall of the curtain. In a play, actors generally speak lines in succession without overlap. This suggests that there is a clear, albeit brief, pause between each chime of the various clocks. And then I develop. Additionally, the reference to final speeches suggests that the clocks may be chiming to signal a change in event, similar to the change from a play to a post-play activity.
You're still with me, brave, noble, intelligent creatures. It's now time to move from focused, targeted work on individual quotations to writing longer responses. We've done some Hardy, we've done some Eliot, time for the creme de la creme, some Dickens.
Read the extract below. Explore how the writer uses language to show Oliver's feelings and character. In your answer, you should select powerful words and phrases. Explain how the writer has created effects by using this language. So now read the passage on screen incredibly carefully. Press pause now. When the examiner marks your response, he or she will have a list of suggested phrases which candidates may refer to. Now, these are only a guide, but I always think there are certain phrases in a passage which all candidates hoping to get a 9 will refer to. For instance, if you see a simile or metaphor or personification, you must quote it and explore its effects. Don't also duck out of exploring more complex words. This will help differentiate you from more mediocre candidates. Now, quoting all the underlined phrases and any other phrases which you think are useful and relevant, have a go at completing something approaching a full 1F, task 5. I would allow yourself around 25 minutes to write your response. Press pause now. So the examiner will have this grid to refer to when marking your response on a best fit basis. Overall, does your response show sound, clear understanding of words and phrases? In which case, it's a band 4. Or is there some genuine insight, some deeper understanding of words and phrases? If yes, it's a band 5. Or is the analysis not just insightful but detailed and wide-ranging? In which case, it could be a band 6. Examiners are given these notes to help them make their judgments. Notice that they're looking to reward candidates who select powerful or unusual words, not just the obvious ones. They're also looking to reward those who don't just explore the literal meaning of a word or phrase, but the connotations and associations. Thank goodness it isn't a tick box system, so it's the quality of the analysis rather than the number of points which is rewarded. But of course, you need to reference enough points in order to show that your insight is wide-ranging. The examiner's guidance then introduces a list of quotations with suggested analysis. You already have these words and phrases as I underlined them in red in the passage. Let's have a look at the mark scheme's suggestions for these words and phrases. Read these through carefully now, pressing pause. Continue reading, pressing pause now. Now's the time to give yourself an approximate mark out of 15 for your response. Spend some time thinking about this, toggling back to the comments in the mark scheme if you find that helpful. Press pause now. Here's my response. Oliver clearly feels frightened in the undertaker's shop, as shown by the adverb timidly used to describe the way he looks around. He has a feeling of both awe and dread, which suggests not only that he has a kind of horrible respect for his surroundings, but also that he's extremely worried. After looking at an unfinished coffin, a cold tremble came over him. He is so frightened that he physically shakes and senses that his body temperature has dropped due to his terror. Oliver is so frightened by the unfinished coffin in particular that his mind conjures up disturbing supernatural images. Dickens reveals that he almost expected to see some frightful form slowly rear its head from the coffin. This implies that Oliver has a vivid imagination and retains a childish possible belief in either the supernatural or humans returning to life from death. Certainly he feels extremely uncomfortable and ill at ease in this undertaker's shop, and he can't help speculating about terrifying unexpected movements. His extreme fear is such that he could be left unhinged mentally, as shown in the phrase driven mad with terror. Oliver is in such a fraught state of mind that the entire room seems to be full of terrifying supernatural possibilities. Some elm boards seemed like high-shouldered ghosts with their hands in their breeches pockets. This simile shows Oliver imagining the wooden boards, used presumably to build the coffins, as terrifying phantoms. Indeed, you could argue that his fear results in him failing to discern the tangibility of the wood, and is distorting his perceptions about what is clearly a substantial object. Finally, the writer suggests that the small space between the country looked like a grave. This simile builds on previous imagery about death and the supernatural, and suggests that this area is dark and very plain, devoid of any brightening human comforts. It suggests that Oliver is unable to dissociate himself from a frightening feeling of being very close to death. His mattress is in this area, and so presumably he will be sleeping and resting there. However, this simile implies that he will not be able to recuperate while sleeping, and instead will be haunted by gnawing fears about death and the supernatural. Let's just take one of the paragraphs and look at how it meets the criteria for Band 6. Well, note that the first sentence immediately answers the question. There's no waffle or meaningless phrases such as "the writer uses language to achieve numerous effects in this passage." Next is the quotation of a powerful, interesting phrase. Indeed, it is a simile, and so will be directing the examiner to the specific point about imagery in the mark scheme. Note also how I have embedded the quotation so that it flows within the sentence. I guess you don't get specific marks for this, but it does help your writing flow so much better and does suggest something about your ability as an English pupil. And here I analyse the simile with precision before developing my analysis imaginatively.
So how do you achieve a grade 9 for the 1F question of the CIE IGCSE English Language 0627 Paper 1? Well, I think you do so by precisely answering the question, using short quotations of powerful, interesting, occasionally tricky words and phrases. And then you make a point of analysing these words and phrases in plenty of detail, using connectives such as additionally, moreover, and furthermore to force you to develop. At the time of writing, the actual exam is in just over 2 weeks. Good luck to all of you, dear viewers. This has been Schofield on Shakespeare.